take a look at one more example of how we can sketch a graph of the system of linear inequalities. If you look at this system here, we actually have 4 inequalities we're dealing with. X is greater than or equal to 1, x is less than or equal to 4, y is greater than or equal to -1, and then y is less than or equal to 1/2 x plus 1. Remember, we're going to do 4 separate lines. So you kind of ignore these for now, and let's just pay attention to this one. X is greater than or equal to 1, I'm going to think of it as x equals 1. Remember, if it's an x equal line, x equals is vertical. So we're going to draw a vertical line through 1, and because it can be equal to it, it'll be a solid line. So I'm going to draw a solid line through x equals 1. Fill information to the graph here. This is the x-axis, this is the y-axis. And I'm going to make this line a little bit thicker. Okay, so that's the line x equals 1. Now let's go back to this. We're talking about all the values greater than or equal to 1. So we're talking about all the values greater than or equal to 1. We're talking about these out here. This is 1, okay? Sloppy, but this is 1, 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth. These are all values bigger than 1. So that's what we want to shade in. Now let's take a look at the next one. Getting rid of my cross out lines here. X is less than or equal to 4. So let's focus on x equals 4. If we're talking about a line x equals 4, it's going to be a vertical line through 4, and because it can be equal to, I will do a solid line. Here's 4, and I'm going to do a line, vertical line through 4. Now, oops, we are talking about all the values that are less than or equal to 4. So if we're talking about the values less than 4, we're talking about 3, 2, 1, 0, -1, -2, so on and so forth. But remember in the first example I said you'd get good at the fact that you might not have to do as much erasing later because you're going to start to see the overlaps. I could definitely fill in everything over here because that's all the values less than 4. But notice there's going to be no overlap in this section. They're only going to overlap between the vertical lines x equals 1 and x equals 4. So this is what I mean about starting to see the overlap. I'm only going to fill in this section here. Is it okay if you fill in the whole section? Yep. But it just tends, when you can start seeing that you're only filling in where there's an overlap, it starts to get not quite as messy and a little bit easier. In fact, I'm going to go take the initiative right now to kind of erase all this here, because we only solutions, remember, only where they overlapped. When we first graph a solution of inequalities, we only graphed, or when we first solved a system of equations, we were interested in where the graphs of the two lines crossed, that overlap. Okay, so now what we're dealing with here is we're dealing with two lines and just their overlap. All right, moving on to our next one. We have y is greater than or equal to -1, so I'm going to think of it as y equals -1. A y equals line is horizontal, so I'm going to come to my y-axis to -1, and I'm going to draw a horizontal line. Because it can be equal to, I'm going to draw a solid line through -1. Now let's go back to this. We're talking about y is greater than or equal to -1. So we're going to be talking about all the values above -1. The same thought though, sorry, it goes all the way down here. The same thought, I'm only interested in where there's an overlap. So I'm only going to fill in this section right here because that's where the overlap is. Okay. Now, again, remember, you can fill in all of this. All of this represents the solutions. Y is greater than or equal to a -1. But I'm looking for the overlap. I'm looking for which points make all the solutions true. So that's all I'm going to shade in. The last one is in slope-intercept form. y equals our slope of 1/2 times x plus 1. So our y-intercept is 1. So I come to the y-axis at 1 and put a dot. I then apply my slope from that point. My slope is 1/2. So rise 1, run 2. Rise 1, run 2. Because it can be equal to, we are going to put a solid line through these points. Like that. Now, last step. We need to test a point, so let's test the point 0, 0. And we're going to come back to our equation here, and we're going to say, is 0 less than or equal to 1/2 times 0 plus 1? Is 0 less than or equal to, well, 0 plus 1, which is 1. Is 0 less than 1? Yes. So this point makes it true. So we want to shade below the line because we want to shade this point. Okay. Again, that includes all of these values, but I'm only interested in the overlap. We're solving the system of linear inequalities. Every single one of these points that I had colored in, or kind of colored in green, is a solution, but we want to know what is the solution for all of them. And you can see that's only this right here. So if I know I am shading below the line, but my only overlap is right here, because remember I can't go any further because that it wouldn't include any blue, this ends up being my solution, just this section right here. Okay. So then I could go through and erase the rest of this. Don't worry too much about erasing. If you darken in the area that you're referring to and it's easy to see that that's the section you're talking about, that's okay as well. Is it best to erase so you only get this section? Yes, it is. But if you wanted to just darken things in so you can see where the overlap is, that is fine. Okay, as long as we know for sure and there's no question about what the solution is to the system of inequalities. So systems of inequalities, they do take some work, and you have to do things pretty carefully. We know how to graph each one of these inequalities individually. What we need to practice now, and you will get better as you practice it more, is graphing all of them on the same graph and knowing that this section right here, every point in this section will be a solution to all 4 of these linear inequalities.